This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. We're in Grand Rapids, Michigan for this episode of the podcast, and joining me is Jason Spaulding, one of the founders of Brewery Vivant and Broadleaf Brewery and Spirits. I should say one of the founders, founder with your wife.
Right. Yeah. Got to make sure we include that for sure.
Yeah. With your wife, Chris. You all have launched Brewery Vivant. Was it 12 years ago now, Jason?
Yeah, 12 years ago. Makes us one of the older breweries in Grand Rapids. Kind of seems like we just started, but yeah, it's 12 years.
Well, you're keeping things fresh and keeping yourselves on your toes with the Broadleaf brand, 2 additional locations with that and a different focus and a different approach to beer, all kind of complementing each other. But definitely some stalwarts here in Grand Rapids. We're going to talk about your approach to brewing and the approach to building these beer businesses. And of course, some of the things that have happened as of late. You know, before we started this podcast, we were talking, and of course, you resonated the episode that we talked to Tommy Arthur about growing down with you all are in some of that process yourselves. We'll kind of talk about how you all are facing this reality in the beer world, as well as how you're adapting to that and trying to find what customers want you all to be in this world of beer. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about your approach to building Belgian style beers and, building a brand around that in this kind of cool church-like locale here in Grand Rapids. And then, of course, evoking this kind of more modern, contemporary approach with progressive beer styles out at Broadleaf, as well as spirits and other things there. We're going to talk about all of that. But first, for years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across the country. They're proud of the cool partnerships they've built, offering 24/7 service and support. G&D builds with non-proprietary parts, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation. G&D's in-house engineering crew have been piping breweries, wineries, and distilleries for over 30 years. They offer free piping design and consultation with the sale of every chiller they build. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com or call to discuss your next project. This episode is also sponsored by BSG, distributors of TNS hop oils, a revolutionary hop product that gives your beer all the hop intensity with none of the astringency. Make better beer and get more from each turn with less work. Change your brewing game with TNS hop oils. Visit bsgcraftbrewing.com to learn how. Before we start, just want to say thanks to Experience Grand Rapids for their support in making this trip possible. To plan your own beer trip to Grand Rapids, start at experiencegr.com. Jason, let's kick it off with a little bit about history of Vivant, Broadleaf, etc. And maybe we start with that kind of personal beer history. What led you to this point of starting a brewing business? What got you to that point? What's that arc of beer look like for you?
For us, so my wife and I met at my previous brewery. So part of the history too is, like many people, was a home brewer in college. Me and my friend Brett, right out of college, we started New Holland Brewery, which is in Holland, where we went to college, Hope College. Actually drank a lot of beer there, even though it's kind of a religious school. But there's really a trip to Europe we took with the soccer team that we got to see like the culture of beer. And that was really kind of eye-opening. We were already into kind of craft beer. We'd go skiing in Colorado every year. And kind of see how, these breweries existed and how they were part of the communities. And it really echoed what we saw in Europe. And we came back, this is like when we graduated and kind of we're fading from following that degree that we earned in college and looking at, hey, could we start a brewery on our own? And that's really where it came together. In 1997, we opened New Holland Brewery. It was the same, we had...
So you were one of the founders of New Holland.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then our fraternity brothers, Mike Stevens and Dave Angbers, were the founders of Founders Brewing. So, Dave was one of my roommates in the early days of Hope College, but I know those guys really well. And we kind of started those breweries at the same time. And then, fast forward, in the late 90s, craft beer was really new to Michigan. Bell's, at that time was really, really small. Larry Bell was delivering beer in his van. There's a homebrew shop in Holland we'd buy supplies from, and Larry would show up and drop beer off, which is kind of cool. But that's how far back we're talking.
Yeah, yeah.
But I kind of count us we're like the second wave of craft beer in the New Holland days, late '90s, and then but those were the days we were out selling beer and there weren't that many people interested really. But it grew a lot, and in Holland anyway, it was kind of controversial to have a brewery because it's kind of a conservative town, and we attract a lot of people just because we were brazen enough to do it. And so we kind of got my feet wet there, and I stayed there. So it was 1997 when we finally opened. 2005, I left, and I met my wife there. She worked at Herman Miller, which is a furniture company, but they're also a very, they were one of the leading companies to start the LEED certifications, and she was in their design for environment group. So she kind of brought the sustainability part, and she loved beer, which is why we got married, which was great. And in 2005, I left, and her and I kind of put plans together to we didn't know what it was going to be at the time, but to start Brewery Vivant. And that's what it ended up being. And when we built that plan together, we just kind of were writing a plan for what we thought a business should look like with a brewery. And we tried to build it with, sustainability in mind, with, doing all the right things. And it kind of came together. And this place in Grand Rapids, there's a few ways to build a business plan, but we built the plan first, then tried to find the location, and the location we found in this old funeral home that looks like a church just kind of came together, and couldn't pass up on it, and then here we are. Yeah,
yeah, just like that. Here we are. Yeah,
snap a time. Yeah,
Herman Miller, that's fantastic. I have pieces of Herman Miller furniture in my home, and I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of modern furniture in general, but
that's an advantage living in West Michigan. I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And if you know where to look, I mean, you can find like used Ames chairs.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's common stuff over here, but it's kind of fun.
Fantastic. That's a whole nother topic that I could go down a giant rabbit hole on. So in 2005-ish, you decided to start Vivant. What year did you all open?
And we didn't actually open here until 2010. So I got a job when I left New Holland where I had to wear a tie, and it was kind of miserable.
Yeah.
It was fun though. At the same time, it was economic development. So I'd visit. The whole idea of economic development is you're trying to help companies grow, bring companies into Michigan. So I'd visit owners of manufacturing companies mostly, and the ones that I connected with the most were the ones that we talk about beer.
Yeah.
So I couldn't get it out of my system. It was just in my system. And my wife finally one time I would always talk about, okay, when I start my own brewery again, and she just got tired of me talking about it and finally just said, all right, if we're going to do it, let's just do it. And I end up, I committed to 2 years to that job. I did my 2 years, and I kind of jumped off, and that's, I went kind of reinvigorate the whole brewing thing. I connected with Siebel, and I could do the concise course either in Chicago or in Munich. Munich seemed a lot more fun.
Sure.
So I did that, and that was kind of our jump off point to get Vivant started.
Yeah.
So, and that was probably 2008. It's a process to get something started. And if you remember the downturn of the economy in 2009,
Right.
it was quite a task. So it was longer than we thought when we started to get it going, but it all came together, and the location was something that I think is kind of iconic to our brand now. And we kind of recognized at the time, like, you don't get a second chance at a location like this. And it had it's an old chapel, as you've seen, but adjacent to it was a, kind of a warehouse space with a tall ceiling. It's all this bow truss historic building, but
we're up in the rafters right now in the office, and with this curved roof over us.
Yep. So we just kind of went for it, and it's it's been great for the neighborhood, and they've embraced us, and Grand Rapids, is.
So how much did the place and the building that you find impact the idea of the business?
When we finally opened, this was there were already restaurants here, but it was previous to that, a really bad neighborhood, and there was a LEED certified building across the street that happened, and then another one happened. So it kind of had this real cool vibe going. And if I could have picked any building in Grand Rapids to go into, like just to kick someone out and come in, like this was the area I wanted to be in. So, but we did build the plan first and found the building to fit it. And it was just one of those things, once we found it, like we just held on to it like a bulldog and made it work, even though economics and everything were kind of working against us. It was just the right thing for us, and we kind of knew it.
Yeah. So the idea was to build a quasi-Belgian focused brewery,
right?
Making Belgian style beers across that kind of Belgian style spectrum.
Yeah, and part of that was looking at what people weren't doing, and part of that was our personal passion. We had an opportunity, like when I took that course in Munich, my wife came and joined me. We toured Germany a little bit, and then we immediately crossed the border into France and Belgium, and just like fell in love with these. We had an idea we'd like it, but when we actually got there, all these little farmhouse breweries, we purposely went to the ones in southern Belgium, these little tiny breweries no one's ever heard of before, but they're these little village breweries, and all the beer was amazing, and it all went great with food.
Even though they're making it wrong to the Germans.
Right. Yeah, to go, and that was fun too, to go from like German teachings to, French and Belgians just threw all that out the window. That I think actually made it even more special for us.
Right.
And just kind of cemented. And then actually, we flew out of Paris, and we stayed in Paris for a couple days. And on my way out, I found Leffe, one of my favorite Belgian beers, in 16-ounce cans. And then fast forward, when we actually opened, we were trying to decide, do we go cans or bottles? Back in 2010, it was still bottles. We weren't the first. I think we were the second in Michigan to go with cans. But having that experience and seeing how a Belgian beer in a can could work, stuck with me, and we were kind of on the leading edge of that too. But it fit our sustainability efforts too. So, all those experiences tied together and kind of made it what it was.
Sure. Well, I want to talk about how you then formulated, the idea, the specific character of Vivant beers, because just saying Belgian is far too broad. You definitely have a specific point of view within this broader world of Belgian beer. I want to talk about how you formulated that and found this focus of what might be some of those, kind of key Vivant points through this Belgian spectrum. Before we do that, what is AccuBrew? It's an analytical tool designed to collect and compare the information you need to refine your fermentation process by tracking your sugar conversion, clarity, and temperature in every batch. But why do you need AccuBrew? AccuBrew is more than a glorified speedometer. AccuBrew is an ever-evolving tool tailored to you, your process, and your business. Save time, protect your schedule, and detect problems before they happen. Quality, consistency, and confidence. That's what AccuBrew delivers. Also, at ProBrew, they believe that your brewery deserves equipment as unique as the drinks that you craft. That's why their solutions are specifically designed to help you brew your beer, not someone else's. From brewing to fermenting to carbonating and can filling, ProBrew's customizable equipment empowers breweries to expand operations at their own pace. For more information, visit www.probrew.com or email contact us at probrew.com to learn exactly how they can take your operations to the next level. ProBrew, brew your beer. And scheduling freight carriers should be the last thing on a brewer's mind. So why not trust the experts to handle freight for your ingredients? Old Orchard is partnered with a leading logistics firm in the craft beverage industry to transport your flavored craft concentrate blends. When you order 2 pails or more from Old Orchard, you qualify for freight quotes. To get started, head on over to oldorchard.com/brewer. So Jason, you tour through Belgium. You have this idea with Vivant that you want to, formative idea to build this brewery around the idea of Belgian style beers. But you have a viewpoint to that. It's maybe not quite the same as other American iterations of Belgian beer. There is, I don't want to, it may be not quite, you made some yeast choices and you made some very specific, functional approach choices to give these beers a character. Talk to me a little bit about that.
One of the things that really hit us on that trip was, how this beer and food went together, and
you do have a kitchen here at Vivant. It is a brew pub.
Yeah, it's a brew pub, and we try to keep it, very European too, and like the charcuterie board and cheese board is something that it's one of our best sellers, and it's something that we just love. And we do pâtés and things like that, which is all taking us back to our experience and those things with matching food and beer back in 2009. People weren't doing that. It was still people think of wine and cheese and wine and food, but not really beer and food. But that's, if you think about it, that's going back to when beer was just a single fizzy lagers from the big three,
sure.
Right? So people didn't think of, that's what they thought of beer. They didn't think of beer and food going together. So that was an opportunity that we saw, making very flavorful beers and pairing it with food. And also previous to that trip that I took to Munich, I went and worked for Zingerman's in Ann Arbor, which I don't know if your listeners are aware of that, but it's a very food-centric place, and I worked at
Zingerman's Deli. I mean, or is it still a deli? Maybe it's just bigger than that.
Well, now they have multiple businesses. They have a cheese company. I worked at the Roadhouse, which was their full-service restaurant, but very, very food-focused, and just that food element and how beer can be a natural partner with that. And if you do it right, the food tastes great on its own, the beer is great on its own, but if you put them together and you elevate that experience, that was really just exciting to us, and that was new. So that was really our motivation. And, good food beers fit that kind of saison, that farmhouse thing. And I really loved the way that farmhouse beers are really undefinable. They're kind of very vague. And all the breweries we met in Belgium and France, it's very American to want to, we would ask them, what style is this? Is this a saison? Is this a bière de garde? And they're not brewing with that in mind. They're just brewing a beer that they want to make. And we love that too. And that's that contrast to German brewing too. They're just making what they were feeling. It's very artistic, and we loved it. So that was really influential.
Our taxonomy tends to lead the beer production, where their taxonomy follows it. Right. We can look back at and classify certain things after they're made rather than brewing in order to fit that classification. In America, everything seems more style driven, even though styles are a complete myth. They're just a construction that we've created for marketing and solely that, and so, right. In that sense, it is interestingly free in that these are just the beers we make. Now they tend to have some commonalities because, hey, it's easier to use yeast that your neighbor might have also.
Right.
And, easier to use ingredients that you might be able to share or, get within that region. And of course, your water is going to, set that foundation for the beer, and anything in a specific area on a similar water source might be the same. But because those water sources also change and some of those ingredients change, you're going to end up with all of these different beers and, in all of these different places.
Yeah. And those are all things that we took note of in our travels, and like, wow, like if we could do that, like we don't want to come back and import ingredients from Europe. We want to come back and let's use what's around us. And, Michigan, being surrounded by the Great Lakes, is a great water place. Like we don't really have to do much to our water at all. It's just great brewing water. And we have, people aren't aware, but the climate in Michigan, outside of California, it's the most diverse agriculture center there is as far as what we can grow and things like that. So, we can use what's around us, which is, so fun. And it was just kind of blowing us away once we started down this path, and that food beer connection was there. And then, let's make beer that speaks for itself. And our number one beer still is Farmhand, which was kind of modeled after this beer experience we had in France. There's this little brewery called Charmoy, and the closest. So this was in France. The closest brewery to this place was Orval. So when they needed an extra bag of grain or needed help, they would go talk to Orval, which just like boom, well, that's amazing. But Farmhand's kind of modeled after my memory of that beer experience. So I bet if I had drank their beer and our beer next to each other, there'd be nothing alike. But it's just like my memory of it. But that ends up, it's still our number one beer. We try not to define this beer, so it's actually we just call it a farmhouse ale. But it's actually with a bière de garde yeast, but it's brewed more like a saison. But also means we can never enter this in competition and expect to get anything from it. However, our customers love it. First beer we made, still our number one beer. I mean, so that's what really counts, I think.
The styles we have, and I know I've said this before, the styles that we have in the categories we've built they follow, they were based on groupings of existing commercial beers. They are descriptive and they should not be prescriptive.
Right.
But at times, and it's so funny to see that even within these kinds of categories, there are always those beers that sometimes are even listed as paragons of that. They don't fit exactly within that category because that's the nature of these things. The creativity and the locality and the individual creative input that the brewers have often means that these things that are somewhat similar are not exactly the same and shouldn't necessarily, Anyway, all of that is to say that this is an interesting one. And when I taste it, it may not drink like what I stereotypically might think of as a saison. The yeast is a little more demure. It's a little bit tighter and maybe even a little bit more bitter, but not necessarily in that kind of, floral, noble kind of way. It's just, but it has that kind of, structure with a bit of peppery yeast note to it to give it more of that structure, without it feeling, like overtly caricaturally Belgian in that sense.
Right. We're trying to ride that line because, originally my whole goal was how can we make beers like this everyday beers where people would think of Belgian beers as like a specialty occasion beer. You think of like a caged bottle of Chimay or something like that. Those end up being, once a year beers. But, I wanted to make a beer like this, put it in a can, make it accessible, use what's around us. So, this beer, we use, it's about 20% unmalted wheat that we get locally. And that was something that we took note of over there was How can we tie this local aspect in, and there aren't a lot of malting options back then. There are more now locally, but the unmalted wheat thing was a way we could tie in the agriculture and make it unique. And and we liked kind of the lower ester aspect of it, that you could make it an everyday beer. And it's one of my favorite beers to drink with food. So I think we did it. So
doesn't feel out, it's not that far different from more, American ideas of pale ale. It definitely has its own character that's different than that, but it's adjacent. It's close enough that, someone could drink that as they come in here and feel like if they understood pale ale, it doesn't, it's not going to, completely throw them off into some other place.
Yeah, just different enough to give it something unique. And it's, we've built the brand over this 12 years, and it's, you can find it on tap all over Grand Rapids, which is nice. It's kind of sunken in, and people have accepted it, and it's great.
What are some of the other kind of core and mainline beers that Vivant goes back to and has been continuously making over the years?
Well, that's evolved quite a bit, and we're a brewery that, the pub is very important to us. We've always been, in the categorization of how the BA looks at breweries. They define it as if you sell 25% or more of your beer on your own premises, you're a brew pub, which we've always fit into. The pub's always been important to us, but we did have a desire to go out into the marketplace, and it's been interesting to see how that's influenced what we make. So originally, We had Farmhand. We had a beer called Triumph, which was a Belgian IPA. And then we had this beer Solitude, which was basically a double. And then we've retired a lot of those beers that have gone out of favor for whatever reason. And it is a challenge to, with a classic Belgian yeast to make the hops work. But we took, on that original trip, we stopped at Le Chouffe, and we had the opportunity to taste what was their hoppy? They call it hoppy Chouffe, or I can't remember, but it was like a triple with Amarillo and some other American hops.
Yeah,
they were test marketing it at the brewery. They had not yet, to my knowledge, sent it to the U.S. yet, but it was that first time I'd seen a Belgian brewery bring American ingredients in, and that was back in whatever that was, like 2009. So that kind of blew me away. So that Triumph was kind of our answer to that how could we do that? But it ended up not being super popular outside our pub, and that distribution part. It's kind of interesting, and I'm sure we can talk about it. We're in an interesting spot with our brewery where we're kind of retrenching and looking back to our original roots, but we kind of extended ourselves into this distribution aspect, and that really dictated what we made more and what we would discontinue. So if it didn't sell well in the marketplace, even though it was a pub favorite, we would have to retire it because you don't want to lose that shelf space. So around here, we've got a store called Meijer, big grocery stores. When we opened, we hadn't even made a beer yet, and I got a call from the buyer from Meijer that wanted our beer. And it was like, that was amazing. So they were looking for it, and it was great. But then fast forward to today, I can't get the Meijer people to even call me back. So things have changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
But if they want you to change something, you change it. So, if I think about what we made originally and what we're making now, that has changed quite a bit in beers. So we earlier had a beer called Solitude. We haven't made that for so many years, but that was another original beer. But that was a double. And doubles just don't sell in the marketplace. We sell it in the pub, but that's not a very marketable beer on the shelf. But so it's interesting to see how that arc has changed over time, and we've evolved with it. But I think we've still kind of kept the same line to make it all work. And lately we've been talking about how we went really hard at. The only way we could describe it was this, farmhouse in Belgium, but we kind of called it zoomed out. So now we have a Czech style lager on tap, and we kind of call it like a European zooming out. So we're kind of looking at the beers that we make at Vivant have some tie to a European tradition, and that's kind of opened up enough avenues for us that we can keep people interested. It's still fun, and it's true to our brand, and it's been great.
What drove that zoom out? I mean, because, incorporating Czech style lager or Czech style Pilsner into a mix of Belgian beer, I mean, that is something different, Yes, there's definitely a European underpinning to all of it, but, is that something that was driven by what you all wanted to have, or a space that you had in a lineup? What you saw as in terms of demand from consumers here? Or is it more brewer driven, where they wanted to explore and play in this kind of space because that was just some beer that was interesting to them?
Yeah, that is an interesting question in itself, because the vision that I had for the brewery back then, was looking at a lens. When we got our license, there were about 2,000 breweries in the country, which seemed like a lot. And the thought was to be this kind of unique player, making exclusively these farmhouse or Belgian style beers, and have a core at home, but then we could send them off to Chicago, we could send them off to some other key cities, and they'd be really, really unique. But that looks so different once you crest 7,000, 9,000 breweries. That world just looks different. And so
the need to have one brewery that has shallow distribution in major metropolitan areas where there are places that need these beers sounds really good for a while, until every one of those major metropolitan areas has their own brewery also making a pretty good iteration of those
Right.
same exact styles.
Yeah, Chicago is a perfect example. When we went in there, it's probably, we opened 2010. We went in Chicago 2012, and when we would show up at these bars, they'd be like, "Oh my God, this is great, a local beer." They put us on tap. They loved us, and within like 2 years, we were no longer local. Now we were the outsiders because there's so many breweries opening in Chicago, and so we kind of retreated from there, and it's just been interesting. So, part of this zoom out has just really been, we need to be able to, we can't just be such a specialty brewery. We need to be able to make other things. And, we're lovers of all things beer. We just happened to choose that path because it seemed like the right thing at the time. And I love a nice, dry Saison, and, those are things that I live for, but I also, I love hazy IPAs. I love, Czech lagers. I just love all things beer. And so, we had to change that a little bit. And then also, the broadleaf spinoff kind of came out of just watching what was happening in the beer world. We built our brand so concisely around this Vivant image that we just couldn't get ourselves to make beers that drifted too far into, adjunct stouts and hazy IPAs. Just didn't seem quite right. So that was our answer to kind of spin that off.
So rather than dilute the brand, you created a new brand and a new space with a different brew house and everything else in order to kind of explore that. Let's talk a little bit more about that. But first, from the rotatable pickup tube on Rogue Brewing's pilot brew house to the integrated hop backs on Sierra Nevada's twin prototyping brew houses, SS Brewtech has taken technology they invented, working with world-renowned industry vets, and made them available to every craft brewer. To learn more about SS Brewtech's innovation list, head on over to ssbrewtech.com. Also, have you heard of Christian Hansen? They're the fermentation experts with over 100 years of experience in dairy and wine. And they're now bringing that knowledge of microbes to brewers with their Smart Bev range of frozen liquid yeast and freeze-dried bacteria. This portfolio allows for consistent performance at the brewery and produces a range of high-quality brews. Reimagine what your beer can be. Go to chr-hansen.com. That's chr-hansen.com to learn more about the Smart Bev line of products. And join the craft beer community in Sacramento March 19th through 22nd for the California Craft Beer Summit. Access educational sessions on business and technical skills and network with industry leaders all under one roof. Speakers include David Walker, Natalie and Vinny Chilurzo, and Ken Grossman. The summit is an important opportunity for your entire brewing team, from production to sales to marketing, to develop their knowledge, skills, and experience in the industry. Visit cacraftbeersummit.com for the full speaker and seminar lineup and to register. So let's talk about Broadleaf, this spinoff. I love this idea that rather than fundamentally change the Vivant brand and then start brewing all of these other beers, you're like, let's just create another location, spread the take our approach to hospitality there, maybe with a different look and a feel that'll allow us to play with some of these other brewing ideas that we have budding in the back of our brewer's brain.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that kept me up at night. We're watching this evolution of New England style IPAs, and like we're getting people into the pub asking for beers like that, and we're trying to hold our line on what we're making, and that really, was tough to watch. And I'm one who loves to learn all things about beer, and I was really trying to dive in and learn everything I could about this beer style I've never tasted before. So I watched it happen, and we kind of we did actually make a couple beers like that under our label and tried to make it work, but it just never set well. So the idea was we were actually looking for a warehouse space to help grow our distribution business. We were renting like 5 different facilities. We had wood barrels. People have heard of these underground mines we have in Grand Rapids where KBS from Founders is stored. We had our Whizzer barrel ground in there, so we had barrels of beer down there. We had cold storage for other beer at another rented warehouse. We had our cans and things yet at another warehouse. So we were looking to buy our own warehouse, and the only place we found was something that had like commercial zoning. So it was a 25,000 square foot building, perfect for what we wanted. We could house all our barrels, all our cans, all our things in there, but we had to have a commercial aspect to it. So that was really like the jumping off point was, do we make it Vivant 2 in an old warehouse? And it didn't feel genuine because, I think this location really speaks to the personality of our brewery, being in a chapel and that has a real European feel. And, try to recreate that inside a warehouse. What do you do? Like build a fake chapel inside a warehouse? That would just feel fake. So that was kind of the thought was, okay, here's our opportunity. We could, participate in this, everything we're seeing happening in beer, but keep our other brand whole. And, we're observing what other breweries are doing. I'm, a huge fan of, what Lost Abbey was doing, and he had gone down that road. What do they call their hop series?
Sure. Hop. Of course, they have Port and Lost Abbey and Hop Concept.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I watched that
Tiny
happen.
Bubbles is another brand. Yeah.
And the Schilling Group out of New Hampshire, good friends of ours too, and they had another kind of side brand, and that kind of like just exceeded in my head. Like, wow, we could make another brand, participate in all this, fun learning and hop-centric beers, but we could keep our other brand intact. So my wife and I came up with the concept, had a little bit of pushback from people, but once they got it, they understood, and that's been fun. And since then, now we have like a family breweries that kind of represents a nice swath of things, and we have different focuses, and it works out pretty well. Now we just opened our second Broadleaf pub, which, kind of resonates with the younger crowd, and it, our second pub's in a kind of a college area, which is cool, but it also allows us to kind of keep Vivant what we always wanted it to be. And then, I think we can almost double down on that again, because they're just different experiences depending on, where you go. So that's kind of fun too.
Sure. How'd you go about developing a beer program for Broadleaf? Obviously the idea then of that brand is contemporary, progressive, flavor forward, and you wanted to play in some of these other spaces, but, that's easier said than done.
Yeah. Well, in our brewery here at Vivant, we had a pilot system that I bought, but it was really just wedged in the corner, and we never really used it for what it was designed for. It basically, was a 3-barrel system and otherwise a 20-barrel brew house brewery that had, 60-barrel fermenters. So it just kind of became like the fermenters just held cleaning solutions for, everything. They weren't really using it to brew pilot batches. Just it would hold other things.
Yeah.
So when we had this other spot, we moved it out from here and moved it to the new place.
Some expensive yeast drinks that you had there.
Yeah. And hold iodophor to soak things in the mash tun. But now, that we moved to the new location, and originally we had our brew team here at Vivant, and they would just take turns making a beer over there, but it never really worked. And of course, this was 2019 when we made that move. And then of course the pandemic and things like that, we never really got it to take off. But then, during that time we plucked one of our brewers out of the Vivant team, Terry, and put him over there, and he just took off with it. So by having someone actually have a focus on it, and it's a 3-barrel system, so we could just do all these turns and try it. And if it didn't work, it's fine. And we could learn as we, these little micro adjustments, especially, in when you're new to making these hop forward beers, just making these little micro adjustments makes such a difference. And then he was really able to learn everything he could over there. And, we were tooting your horn earlier, but, we really tuned into this podcast, your magazine, to learn a lot. And that kind of gave Terry the, encouragement and things to keep trying and hearing how other people are doing it. Cause it was kind of a mystery back in that time frame, and but we came a long ways with having that
Well,
knowledge.
you guys
and then,
did okay because you
Yeah.
sent us some cans of Chromatic Shatter. I don't remember exactly what year that was, but for one of our IPA issues over the past couple of years, scored a 94 with our blind judges, and it struck me like, well, that's a different thing for for the Vivant team to be coming out with, some rather good, progressive style IPA in this hazy, juicy kind of family.
Yeah, and that was fun. I do have to say, like,
Thank you for mentioning the podcast is helping you all with this creative program. It's awfully kind of you to say that.
Yeah, but it's true, and it's a way that we've been able to kind of connect. Especially during COVID, we don't really travel as much, but that's when we learn the most, spending time with other brewers. But kind of getting similar content with people in brewers or sharing what they're doing. It's been amazing.
I didn't pay you or put you up to saying that, but thank you, thanks.
But here at Vivant, like our first attempt to make, this was me putting the flame under the feet of our brewers here at Vivant. They did not want to make a hazy IPA, but I just made them do it. But the first one we did, they just couldn't help themselves, and they fuged it. And, we didn't quite have it all dialed in, and it went from hazy to clear. And it kind of like, damn it, guys, So, there's a learning curve there, but once we were able to get that pilot system going and actually get some trials and everything like that.
A lot of hazy brewers are centrifuging their hazy IPAs and they stay hazy.
I know it can be done, but back then, that
Yeah.
was such a stretch for
Sure.
a traditional brewer to do these things. It just went against everything that they were trained to do.
Sure.
All the things, pH, the way, just the percent of adjunct grains and things like that. It was just hard. But getting Terry over there to work on this on his own, put all that aside and we're able to kind of dial it in, fairly quickly. But it just took a lot of turns on a small system, and then we learned a lot, and it's been great.
So what's the general beer program now at Broadleaf look like? Hazy IPA plays a significant role in it. What does the rest of it look like?
We're trying to always experiment. And one of the other fun things is, we're pretty near Chicago, and Omega Yeast over there has been a great partner for us. We're kind of on that short list where, if they have something new, they let us know. And, because we have the pilot system too, these stylized yeasts and things like that, we play with all the Quebec yeasts and things like that. We're, got a first run at those and playing around with all of it. And it's just been like this constant learning experience. And I think that's what it's really about. Grand Rapids is kind of, it's a decent sized city. It's 250,000 people in Grand Rapids proper. If you take the outlying areas, it reaches 1 million people. So that brewery is actually in Kentwood, which is considered Grand Rapids, but it's way different. It's more, if you think of every chain restaurant you could think of, and it's got Target, it's got Costco, it's like a shopping mecca, but people aren't, when they go out there, they're not necessarily looking for beer. So we're one of the like few locally owned, non-chain kind of things out there. And it's taken us a while, but we've built up a clientele that's started to find us, and it's been great. But we're able to try out all these different styles of beer and try these things out, and we're kind of winning them over out there. But it's just a different mode. But it's really freeing because we can try all these things, and then we also have, during the COVID time, I don't know if you've heard the story or not, but we had the biggest sale we ever had for Vivant. We got our lager into the Tiger Stadium. That was supposed to happen in, April of 2020. So we started making beer in February for this. So we had, tons and tons of this lager, and we ended up having, and of course we ended up eating it because it, never came together. But we had 400 kegs like ready to go. And my wife and I didn't want to dump it, didn't know what to do. We ended up getting our distilling license, sending, this 5% beer which, when you're in a distilling world, that's also not ideal.
Yeah.
But we made it work. But we distilled all this beer down and made it into spirits, and that's kind of another thing for Broadleaf is it's kind of spirits. It's on that spirits trend where the drinkers out there, it fits the clientele perfectly. We got this nice balance of edgy beers and cocktails and things like that, slushy cocktails. So it's kind of a fun, younger, non-traditional, anything goes kind of place, and it's a nice dichotomy to what we have at Vivant.
Sure. Now that also has driven some more recent changes in the way that you're approaching the business here at Vivant. That naturally, because of this niche focus, it's harder and harder to find the kind of leverage and scale that you need out there in the commercial marketplace to make packaging for distribution a really viable thing now. And especially, the Michigan market in particular is very different from when you started, that some of those players that were growing then are now fully entrenched. You're going up against competitors like Bell's and Founders that have some very significant presences, but also are brewing the styles of beer that they can do in very significant quantities and scale, and price them in that way and put reps out there in the market to support these things, and gain more and more foothold. It's harder when you're doing niche style like Belgian style beers to find that kind of opportunity. And in fact, you guys have made some decisions to also, as we say, grow down and and pull into this process of refocusing on what's core to your brewery businesses.
Yeah, we had original plan was to be about a 5,000 barrel brewery max, and that's kind of how we designed it, and it was going to be pub focused, but we would also distribute beer to some key markets. But that has changed quite a bit, and you're actually here at an interesting time because we just pulled out 7 60 barrel tanks out of here. Got the last few going out tomorrow that we sold, and we're bringing back 2 20 barrel tanks. We were just over capacity. We had the ability to make 10,000 barrels of beer. We peaked at 5,000, and now this last year we did 3,000. And during COVID, we kept talking about things going back to normal, but we're kind of realizing that normal doesn't really exist. So we're kind of taking it where we are now and seeing what makes sense. But last time we made this little beer was 2013. So it's a little bit of a shot to the ego and things like that. But when you stand back and look at it, you just got to be practical about it. But that foray into the wholesale world, if you want that to be important to your company, it does dictate a lot. In even just like the choices, the beers that we'd make and what we're retired, things like that. Sometimes those didn't feel good, but that's what we needed to do to be relevant to sell in the general market, which I think is really, really interesting. And I kind of feel like now that we're shrinking our capacity down, those choices of what beers we make become more important because we can't.
But you don't need to brew 3 turns to fill a 60 barrel fermenter now.
Right.
You can also just brew 1 turn and fill a 20 barrel fermenter.
Yep.
And if the beer, sells within a reasonable time frame in that, you're good. It just, the need to sell that much more of it is lower.
Yeah. And I kind of, we're still going to be distributing beers, but our focus is different, and we're going to make the distribution work for us versus the other way around, which I think also put us in trouble because, if you have a big customer like Meyer and you have distributors, like the last thing you want to do is out of stock them. So we would make more beer than we actually needed, and then we'd eat it if we didn't sell it. And that gets really old. And especially, in this coming out of COVID time where we're trying to, on paper grow, but then have it not actually happen. It would make the beer. You can't sell it if you don't make it, was the thought. But then we end up not being able to sell it, and you eat that a few times, and it's, that doesn't make sense either. And having the bigger tanks you feel like you need to make that much beer.
For someone, for whom lead certification, this kind of environmental responsibility, low energy use and efficiency and being climate positive, creating waste like that is antithetical to the, even this kind of core idea
Right.
that you formed this on.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it never feels good to dump beer, and then obviously the costs and all those things. So retrenching, and just rebuilding it, and we're kind of, be honest with you, we're kind of going back, looking at our original business model again. I kind of kick myself. You couldn't do wrong in 2015. At the time when I made the decisions to expand our tank fleet and things like that, that's what all the information was telling us. So I try not to kick myself too much for it, but boy, I wish I would have kept to my original plan and just stayed small. Because fast forward, as soon as we bought all those tanks, things plateaued and we never quite got there. So, it doesn't feel real good. However,
2015, 2016 kind of was that time where, everybody, the easy growth kind of stopped happening.
Especially, with kind of a niche that we had too, with this kind of leaning Belgian, put an extra emphasis on that. So, but anyway, now I'm actually excited because this has been like weighing on me for a long time. And now those tanks are actually out of here. I'm thinking about all the things we can do to get back to our roots and the beers we want to make. And every decision we make for what kind of beer, we're going to put in that tank is like more crucially important. And, I think we can bring some of these beers back. It's really painful to have a beer that sells really well, is loved by the people in the pub, and then to cut it anyway because it doesn't sell in the marketplace. It's just a different way to look at it. And if you want to compete in that marketplace, like you mentioned, we're in the, we got Founders right in town. We got Bell's down, half hour away. And, those breweries are no longer locally owned. Those are owned by foreign companies now. Yet where does the consumer make that choice? And that's where it gets really slippery. So, we're fighting for that. Is craft important to the consumer? That's the question that comes back. And at what price point and things like that. And in the consumer's eyes, how do we differentiate ourselves from those breweries that they consider craft? And, that's where the real battle becomes really important. And, I think being smaller will help us be agile and all those things. And we're kind of, trying to reduce our overhead, do things like that so we can operate at a smaller volume than what we found ourselves needing to do.
And I guess that's that thing. Like if this is the passionate thing you wanted to do because you love these styles of beer, then you have to accept the economic ceiling that might come with that also.
Right. Yeah. And we're fortunate enough we can, make that pivot and do that. But we're in the process of, how, what does that look like?
Right.
So it's an interesting time for us.
Sure.
But
sure.
I know I'm learning lessons right now. I just don't know what they will be. But I bet when I look back in 5 years, I'll know if these decisions were good or not. But I think we're on the right course.
Oh, it'll be completely different, and you'll kick yourself for everything, all the decisions you were making right now, because it's just inevitable, right?
Yep.
You can't really win, can you?
No.
No. Having said that, it's a Thursday night here. The pub, the brew pub here at Vivant was full of people, eating and drinking, and clearly you're hitting a niche and an experience that still resonates with people even this many years in. For any hospitality business where food is a major piece of that, there's a lifespan, generally speaking, to most restaurants, and you seem to have outlived that general lifespan and maintained this kind of relevance with consumers from that experiential standpoint.
Yeah, and I think really the future is, when breweries can control the environment within their brew pubs and tap rooms, like I think that is really what's gonna, strengthen our industry. Because that environment you create, people are still attracted to that. And now, boy, like breweries used to be this kind of unique thing, but now it's been accepted into the culture, but people still want to go to breweries, maybe for different reasons than back in 1997, but they still show up, and that is easy to control. And if you can tell the story of the beer that you're serving to the people, that resonates and it really, really works. It's hard to do that on the shelf, with your labeling and things like that, when there's no story attached, and it's just another beer that costs, $12 a 4-pack. It's hard to really stand out, but we have that opportunity when people come through our doors, and I think that's kind of what we're looking at, is changing our model to, we have this somewhat larger brewery, so we're making our Vivant beers here, obviously, but the beers that we're distributing for the broadleaf are also made here, which is kind of interesting, having a diastaticus yeast in house while also trying to make hazy IPA. Can be interesting, but
You just got to be good. You can do
you got to
it.
be good.
You
That's
can.
it. You just got to be concise. But but having that control in house and it's going to help us, I think, and having that focus where we're looking more at that experience of having people come through our door rather than the distribution. Even though we're still doing it, but we're kind of turning it on itself and putting it back into how we want to do it.
Sure.
It's kind of freeing.
Are there any big regrets that you have along the way?
Boy, it's hard to sell tanks and move them out. I've had people see me in the parking lot. Hey, you get new tanks? Well, not exactly. So it's kind of hard it's more fun to grow than it is to shrink. I'll tell you that. So, I do.
And it's tough structuring a narrative around that. That
it
doesn't
is.
sound like defeat.
Right. But it'll make us stronger. And I've been kind of living with this, I made this decision to buy all these at the time, and it was, distribution needs us to grow. We can't keep the shelves empty, and we got to do it. And then, to have that change so fast. So I've been kind of living with that for, last 4 or 5 years. So it actually kind of feels freeing. So, somewhat of a regret. I wish I didn't do that. Would have done that back then,
Sure.
But I don't regret it that much, because I think we'll learn, and we're still here, and we're a loved brand in the community, and I think that's sometimes the hardest part. So we have a lot to be happy about, but I wish I could have done a few spending choices differently and things like that. But
Yeah.
in the end, we're in a good spot.
Well, let's look into the future. What does Vivant 5 years from now look like? What do you guys hope to accomplish over the next 5 years? You've been doing this for a while. 5 years from now will be 17 years in the brewery business.
Right.
It doesn't look like selling to New Belgium, Lion, Little World is going to be in your cards like it is for for Bell's. And so it's not a multi-state footprint kind of large scale production brewery. But having said that, it doesn't have to be successful or to achieve the goals that you all have for it. What do you hope to achieve from it?
Well, I think as much beer as we can sell as close to our footprint as possible. I count that as a win. So I like to keep as beer as local as we can make it. I'd love for these. Maybe we open one more brew pub. If I look at optimizing our production. If we had one more brew pub, I wouldn't need to distribute at all. And that's kind of freeing to think of too. So that might be what it looks like, but it turns out we're pretty good at hospitality and having nice outdoor spaces for people, even though in Michigan we don't get to use them as much of the year as other places. But when we do, like people in Michigan, when you have patio season, they live it hard.
Oh yeah,
because you got to get it while you can, because it's not going to last forever. So, I kind of think that's what it looks like, is more of a local footprint, and and my wife and I like having things within a close proximity. So we don't want to be a city away, anything we do is going to be within the Grand Rapids area, but I think we can make a big difference in, continuing that culture of craft beer, which I love. People that appreciate good food, good drink, and that social part. I think it's such an important part of a community to have those places to celebrate and people to gather, that I think that's kind of what we're going to focus on and try to create beverages and beers. Maybe it's beyond beer. I'm glad we never made a seltzer, but I also will never say never, because you never, you don't know what's going to happen. But are
you really glad?
yeah, maybe that would have saved my 60 barrel tanks. But anyway, beer's my love, and I think that's kind of where
Can I go back to 2020 and make a seltzer then?
Right.
2019.
Right.
That would have been the year. Sure. Well, as soon as we think we have this figured out, the business changes on everybody. And so, things are moving still. They're still continuing to move dynamically in craft beer, and they will continue to move. And it does seem like you are diversifying. You're moving your eggs into some different baskets while still using your core competency to find ways to spread across those kinds of things within these varying things that also, not in an inauthentic way, but in a way that lets you also explore some of the ideas that you have for making beer and do it within these different kind of brand contexts. Curious to see what is the next brand going to be a pastry stout brand, or is that already part of Broadleaf? Maybe it's a lager house, although that already exists now in Grand Rapids too. We'll have another conversation about that coming up soon, just to tease everyone on that too. It'll be interesting to see. Do you have any inkling of what direction that might take you?
I'm not sure exactly. I think we're kind of just reacting to what we see and trying to keep true to ourselves. And, what is interesting is, when you like 2020 made you face the possibility of not existing anymore as a company. And when you go through that and come through on the other side, your outlook on life is just a little different. So, part of it is, you might need to make adjustments to your original plan. And I've had friends that, didn't change their plan and aren't around anymore. And, what does that benefit anybody? Right. So making a few adjustments, I think is fine. And if we can do that and still keep the core of what we believe in intact, I think that's hugely beneficial. And I think, whether we foray into spirits a little more, I can see that being a possibility, making some unique spirits and playing with that, because people are really interested in that. But I still hope, in the core of myself, that gets people in the door to eventually try my beer, which is what I love. So
Belgian beer, it's going to come back. You're going to be well positioned when it does. Here in the United States. It's just like Terry and I were talking about earlier. Ska. It's in its fifth wave now. Seems to keep coming back, and it seems to still be, people in their early 20s that are into it every single time it comes back, but it keeps coming back. I think Belgian beer, it's going to move in the same kind of waves. And however that happens, you'll be here.
We'll be here
when it does. That's a great place to bring this to a close. G&D Chillers has partnered with 3,000 plus breweries around the country and offers 24/7 service and support. T&S Hop Oils give your beer all the hop intensity with none of the astringency. AccuBrew gives brewers like you unprecedented insight into your fermentation process. ProBrew's solutions are specifically designed to help you brew your beer. Trust the experts at Old Orchard to handle freight for your ingredients. SS Brewtech has taken the tech they invented, working with industry vets, and made them available to every craft brewer. Try Christian Hansen's Smart Bev range of frozen liquid yeast and freeze-dried bacteria, and join the craft beer community in Sacramento March 19th through 22nd for the California Craft Beer Summit. Of course, if you enjoy this podcast and any others, go to beerandbrew.com, click on that subscribe button, and let us know that it matters to you. Become subscribers just like Jason here at Vivant. We appreciate your support, and we enjoy bringing you this content, and we depend on your support to make it happen. Jason, if people want to learn more about Vivant and Broadleaf here in Grand Rapids, where do they learn more about you?
breweryvivant.com, also on Facebook, the same, and broadleafbeer.com. Check them out.
3 tap rooms here in Grand Rapids.
If you make it to Grand Rapids, each of them are slightly different, so it's worth a stop at each.
Fantastic. Well, it's been fun talking to you here on the podcast. Cheers, Jason.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.